Hey, I'm Charles, director and programmer on Short Fuse, an upcoming roguelike all about defusing explosives before the clock ticks down to 0. We've made a bunch of progress since last month with a brand new tutorial, a new defusable type, and a bunch of other tweaks. Not to mention, we also showcase Short Fuse at One Upstate. So let's start things off with one of our biggest additions to the game, the tutorial. I think we've always known that we needed a tutorial, but it just wasn't a priority. Luckily, our showcase at One Upstate gave us the perfect excuse to finally make it. We wanted to prioritize 3 main things: speed, gameplay, and narrative. To achieve this, a tutorial needed to focus on the primary mechanic of defusal and leave out some of our extra concepts like the computer and the floppy disks. This also helped us control the form the narrative took because it limited what the game could actually depict. It's just enough to get started with the game and still leaves a lot to be explored. Here's a rough draft for the tutorial. It starts with management coming through on the intercom, followed by the introduction of the computer. The computer then takes over and instructs the player on how to defuse objects. For defusal, there are 3 steps that needed to be introduced. The first is that objects must be focused to be interacted with. And then after being focused, clicking on red wires, or whichever your colorblind setting is set to, is the only way to defuse. And finally, wires can be anywhere on the object, so the player needs to know how to zoom and rotate. Additionally, in normal gameplay, clicking on the incorrect wire will cause a game over. This instant lose mechanic doesn't really make sense when you're trying to explain the game because it just adds a lot of extra time to getting through the tutorial. So instead, if the player makes a mistake in the tutorial, we simply restart at the beginning of the step. Plus, the computer lets out its frustration. And I think that's enough for the gameplay for now, so I'll let Jacob take over and explain a bit about how the narrative hooks into the tutorial.
Thanks, Charles. As the first thing that players see when they start the game, the tutorial plays an important role in introducing players to the tone of the story and the role they will play in the company. The player is quickly introduced to 2 of the key ways they'll be getting narrative information. First, a coworker talking over the intercom,
"Good luck!"
and then instructions from the computer. While tutorializing the game's mechanics takes center stage, we're also quietly teaching the player about how to interface with the narrative. Oh, and I want to shout out Charles for the intercom subtitles, but also for the sick computer boot sequence. All I'll say is that there are quite a few hints as to what's really going on at the company hidden within it. That reminds me, I hear the computer's animations were a doozy to get working. Let's get Mike to talk about why.
After months of talking about the computer character's new form, he's finally ready to give you the tutorial. Of course, this brought with it a couple new issues. The first is that I overestimated what the Alembic file type could do in Unity, and it turns out it's not as easy to swap between animations as it is with FBX. So I had to go and combine the animations into one ABC, which honestly felt like defeating my own because of how often these exports crashed on me over the summer. Then I had to export the hands separately in order to get a transform, allowing him to hold objects. Maya did not like exporting FBXs, and I ran into the same crashes again that had me switch to Alembic over the summer. But eventually I was able to get the animations to Charles.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, we definitely had a lot of trouble trying to get everything to work properly. So continuing off of what Mike had said about the computer, we had originally tried to only use the Alembic files in-game. While this was nice and convenient on the modeling side, the problem here was that we needed to reference the actual positions of the hands and monitor. For the monitor itself, that's our anchor point for the computer's display, and for the hands, that's where our defusables show up in the tutorial. But unfortunately, from what we were able to find, these Alembic files just weren't able to support that kind of anchoring. So in order to fix this, we needed to use 2 separate models, an FBX of the body and hands, and an Alembic file for just the arms. The trade-off with this approach was that we needed to sync the animations of FBX and Alembic files to make one consistent animations, but it really wasn't that bad, and it does work. Now with the computer out of the way, the rest of the tutorial was relatively simple to implement. The tutorial uses a state machine with event interactions linked to the defusables and other in-game events. And I did need to make a few tweaks to properly manage anchoring to the computer's hand and prevent the game from initiating the game over sequence upon failure. And going back just a little bit to what Jacob had mentioned before, there's also a new caption system which we use for the intercom. This is only for the tutorial for now, though we want to extend it to the rest of the game in the future. It works by listening for events from Fmod, which is our system we're using to handle audio. These events are set up manually by us, and we change the subtitle whenever one of these events is triggered. There's a lot more to the tutorial too, so stay tuned to our shorts for more information. We've had quite a lot of bugs come up through development, and particularly because of our attendance at One Upstate, it was important that we minimize this as much as possible. One of the bugs we found was with the wave generation system. You see, for any of the factors that use a random number, there is a set variance that pulls a generated number in one direction or the other. This gives us more control over how numbers are selected in the wave generation system. But the algorithm that was being used at the time would sometimes never generate a number due to falling out of range. This led to some incredibly long generation times and even some instances where it seemed like the game was soft-locked. Okay, that's not supposed to happen. To fix this, I made two changes. One was that I changed the algorithm that was being used to generate the Gaussian random to the box-smaller method, and the other was I changed how values that were generated outside of the range were being handled. And as a plus, wave generation times were a lot better than they were before.
Lastly, we wanted to talk about our experience at 1UP in Albany this year. Equipped with our new tutorial and diffusibles, we hit the conference floor and got to recording pages and pages of player feedback. Some main takeaways include providing more tactile interaction with the desk and desk items, as well as tightening up the floppy disk system to give players more control over their runs. We're also begrudgingly making the desktop app selectable by single-click by default, since players had difficulty with the double-click. For the desktop heads out there, don't worry though. We plan on adding an option for double-clicking for that sweet tactile feel. We also got the chance to attend a number of useful talks and panels that gave us a lot to chew on when it comes to the direction of our game's production. Overall, it was a great experience. Seeing so many people enjoying our game firsthand topped up our belief that this is a worthwhile project.
And with that, we have the end of the Short Fuse devlog. Thanks so much for tuning in, and get ready for next month, which will put us back on track with a new computer program and more details about the game show transition. If you're looking for more on Short Fuse, check out our Discord link below and our shorts that come out every week. Thanks again, and see you next time.